How did I learn about Nardagani? NARDA contacted me directly at the university and sent me a letter and some materials which I looked at, and I felt that it was highly unconventional, and I'm not an early literacy person, so I set it aside. A couple months later, she wrote me again, and I pretty much ignored that as well. So the next thing is she called me and said, I'm in Boise and I would like to talk with you. So I sat down with her and she showed me some videos of both students who were at the middle school and high school level and parents of those students who had used Nardagani. And it was entirely compelling because I've worked my whole life in middle schools and high schools, and I know that typically there's anywhere from 3 to 10% of the kids who don't know how to decode and therefore can't do any of their schoolwork or who don't have basic comprehension. And so I was very compelled that even at that age, when nothing else had worked, that Nardagani provided a breakthrough. And if you could see the parents and the kids' relief and joy at having made this breakthrough on the videos, it was just immediately compelling to me. My great passion as a teacher and as a researcher is helping kids who struggle to learn. And when I see something that works to help those kids, then I'm immediately attracted to it. And often, you know, those kids have gone through conventional schooling. They've tried all the conventional approaches. And Einstein defined insanity as doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And so I'm always kind of looking for what would be another way in, what would be a way over the hurdles. And Nardagani certainly provided a way over the hurdle of decoding, and therefore, I think, of comprehension. One of the problems with interventions for reading or for any problem-solving task is ease of use. And so I ran a study with my Boise State Writing Project, took 16 volunteer teachers who had kids, usually at older grade levels, who could not read, could not decode, and we trained them how to use it. It took us a morning. I think that it probably could have been done in a couple of hours. Those teachers likewise trained other kids to be peer teachers or parents from the PTO to be parent keepers and teachers. And they reported that it was an hour and a half or 2 hours to do this. Now that's astonishing because people will spend years becoming a reading specialist. Well, when it comes to the question of how easy it is for the struggling learner or reader to use Nardagani, we found that it was almost like a veil rising from their eyes, that very quickly things that hadn't made sense to the students made sense to them. So I think the mechanism is that in English, there's a very difficult and complex symbol to sound correspondence. Nardagani simplifies that. And so the kids would pronounce a word using Nardagani, and they knew the word from their oral vocabulary, but they didn't recognize it when they looked at it on a page, and all of a sudden it clicked and made sense. In our teacher-reader study, we had several students who were struggling readers, who were resistant readers, who had struggled with reading for many years, who achieved breakthroughs. And this in turn made them, again, relieved, joyful, and able to then do their schoolwork and do pleasure reading and pursue actual reading lives. So we saw huge shifts in attitude, huge shifts in capacity throughout the study with many different kids. The feedback we received from teachers during our teacher research study was that it was simple to use, simple to use with students, simple to help other students to use with students who were struggling, and that they saw very quick results. Sometimes it was almost immediate within 2 or 3 lessons. Sometimes it took some time, 3 to 6 weeks. But when you compare that to a lifetime of struggle that these kids had experienced and would continue to experience, we thought it was amazing how quickly and easily the results were achieved. When you ask the question, why does it work? We don't really know. That wasn't a focus of our study, but we're certain that it works in part because it reduces cognitive load. It makes the symbol-sound correspondence simpler and easier for the kids. And when they can sound out a word and recognize it, they knew the semantic meaning, so it provided a breakthrough. They then recognized that word afterwards. When it comes to the importance of reading, of course, it's functionally necessary to live in a democratic and modern society. It also, to my mind, is a civil rights issue. And here's why. Because when you look at several studies that were long-term, that looked at data from the program and international student achievement across 50 countries, when you look at the British cohort studies, which has followed 17,000 people throughout a lifetime, what we learn is that pleasure reading in youth and the capacity to read in youth is more explanatory of social mobility, later educational attainment and success than any other factor. Now, if you know education research, that's astonishing because the greatest correlating factor has always been parents' socioeconomic status and educational attainment. And to find in study after study that pleasure reading and capacity to read actually has a greater effect is nothing short of astounding. And it means if we want kids to overcome social barriers, marginalization, the struggles that they experience, reading is the most powerful way through. So when we ask the question of how Nardagani is different from other reading programs, basically most reading programs focus on phonics, or what are called utility phonics. It's a very complicated business because there are over 70 utility phonics and well over 200 phonemic rules in English. Nardagani simplifies that to a very small number and I think helps kids to overcome that cognitive load. So it's a very radical approach. It's a very different approach. And it's one that works, or we've found has worked, with the most intractable challenges of students who can't read, who don't know how to decode. When I think about the use of Nardagani, I think that its primary use is in helping the significant percentage of kids who really struggle with that decoding hump or can't get over it. It simplifies the process, it demystifies the process, it provides a way forward for students who have damaged learner identities, who have struggled with the conventional ways of teaching reading. I'd certainly recommend that it be part of any reading teacher's repertoire, and I think any school who's got kids who struggle to decode should make it part of their program. One thing that's very important to me is to keep asking, what if it were otherwise? What if there were other ways to do this? And in the case of reading, we have very standard and conventional practices that tend to work for most kids. However, there's a significant number who it doesn't work for. And I think it's very important that we go to the mat and find these new ways of teaching so that the human potential of these students, so that their capacity doesn't get wasted, so we can actualize their intellectual flowering, because reading is so important to that. And that's why I'm tireless in searching for techniques that will help students that struggle. And I think Nardagani has been a revolutionary technique for me. If we taught every child, or even every older person who struggled with reading, how to read, the world would definitely be a better place. When we look at research on economics, we know that if you don't read, your social mobility is impaired, your capacity to earn money and be productive is impaired. We also know that the greatest correlation between incarceration, being imprisoned, and anything else is being illiterate. And NARDA has gone into prisons and taught every person, every prisoner who volunteered, how to read. This is a breakthrough. This is amazing. What it means is that if we used a technique like Nardagani to catch the students who didn't learn in another way, that we'd be actualizing that human potential and eliminating much of that pain and suffering that is certainly going to ensue if they don't learn how to read. And I personally think it's crazy not to use a technique that could help those kids. I have not only seen Nardagani work, I have experienced it working for myself, working with some struggling readers, and with many of the teachers in my National Writing Project working with struggling readers. I know it works for kids for whom nothing else has worked.